The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so sorry that we're late, but welcome to another edition of Lab Manager Academy webinars, the brainchild of Lab Manager Magazine. I know you missed me. I've been on sabbatical. This is Jeff Tobe, and I hope you're surviving the heat in certain parts of the U.S. and Canada right now. I'm excited to say that with your feedback, these webinars are just getting better and better. I hope that those of you who are loyal participants would agree. Please let us know if there are any topics you'd like to see addressed in upcoming sessions. We want to make sure you're getting what you need out of these webinars. Just email me directly at jeff@jefftobe.com. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce our gracious and generous sponsor, Fran Ebert of Unity Lab Services. Fran?
Thanks, Jeff. We're very proud to be a sponsor of such a valuable educational webinar series for lab managers. And I'm particularly excited about today's topic on how to create an engaged workforce in your lab, because we really believe our tools can make your lab an even better place to work and drive employee satisfaction. We developed our very new service brand, Unity Lab Services, specifically to provide tools that maximize your lab workflow and free up precious time for your workforce, to really allow them to focus more on their core priorities and less on administrative responsibilities. And if they're anything like me, they will welcome that. We definitely recognize that lab managers are asked to balance a wide variety of activities to achieve the best results within a lab. And our vision is a lab where your teams are able to work on top priorities and non-core work is streamlined. Our solutions can enable your lab to leverage our best practices and processes from over 100 years of experience in thousands of labs and eliminate time in trial and error. Streamline supply management, so you can eliminate time in the supply ordering process. Our teams can set up and manage well-stocked, well-organized supply rooms located close to point of use. And additionally, streamline instrument and equipment service management with one call, request for service on any instrument or equipment, regardless of manufacturer, and let our team handle scheduling. We also follow up on on-site hosting of service providers and more. So we really categorize a lot of the services I just talked about into 4 enterprise service product lines. You can see those on your screen. They're offered at the lab, the site, or the enterprise level. As I did mention, they're all vendor agnostic, so that means we can provide service solutions without boundaries on all the equipment in your lab, regardless of manufacturer. And you can see the product lines here, which are consulting, supply management service, asset management services, and scientific support services. In addition to these enterprise-level services, we do, of course, have our traditional instrument-level service offerings, such as support plans, training, parts, and accessories. We would love to talk to you more about our service solutions and how they can save you time, streamline your workflow, and create some employee satisfaction for more engaged employees. To learn more, please visit our website, www.unitylabservices.com, and please enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran, and thanks for being with us. I appreciate everything that you guys do. Today's webinar is Getting Employees to Give Their All, How to Create an Engaged Workforce in Your Lab. Once again, we've outdone ourselves with over 1,000 participants. Thank you so much. Before I introduce our presenter, please know that, first of all, she welcomes your questions throughout her presentation. Many of you know the drill, but those just joining us for the first time, just type in your query in the chat box, and we'll try to get to it during our short time together. If we don't get to it, our speaker will receive your question offline, and we'll answer it privately. Also, I want to make sure that everyone has access to this webinar, and a lot of you have already asked the question, I see. So every webinar is posted on the web about 1 week after airing, so you can get the entire presentation if you like. It's archived. You just need to write down this web address for your today's webinar. It's www.labmanager.com/engaged, ENGAGED. Again, www.labmanager.com/engaged, or just go to the labmanager.com website, click on Webcasts, Podcasts to get all the presentations. So let's get on with the reason you're here. Our speaker today is Edie Raether, creating the action advantage and an ROI, which is return on innovative intelligence, Edie Raether is an international authority on breakthrough thinking for personal and professional excellence. She's an expert on the neuroscience of success, influence, and emotional, intuitive, and innovative intelligence. As a keynote speaker and trainer, Edie has empowered over 3,500 professional associations and Fortune 500 companies on 5 continents. An internationally acclaimed author, Edie's inspirational and business books have been translated into numerous languages. She's an expert resource for hundreds of publications such as the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Times, and the Chicago Tribune and Reuters. Edie has been a college professor and talk show host with affiliates of ABC, with over 35 years of experience in behavioral psychology and coaching. Edie will challenge the way you think and change the way you work. Welcome, Edie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be with you all.
Edie, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just didn't know if there was an introduction with the sponsor and so forth. What I want to cover today, and I'm excited to be with you because one of the tools that I'm going to share, and many of you have replied with wanting to take the change grid assessment. I will be going over that briefly with you. We will not have time to do everybody's individual assessment, but I'll use an example of one of the tasks so that you can really get a feel for what it is and how it can make a difference. First of all, even talking about the engaged employees, companies lose $350 billion a year. Now, I know you may not own the company, but I would think that would be a concern to all of you. The fact is that companies do soar when they do have engaged employees. And one of the statistics is simply that 27% higher profits exist in companies that have engaged employees. There's 50% higher sales in this economy. I would think that would be crucial if you want to keep your job. There is a 50% higher customer loyalty rate. I think there's just a sense of ownership where people care more. It's kind of like going to the mom and pop store. And they have also discovered that 31% of employees that are engaged are older, they've been with the company longer, and they have more senior roles. They have found less engagement with the younger crowd. That is an entirely different seminar because I think a lot of us talk to companies about the me generation and the millennials and so forth, and there's a different system of motivation that really has to be in place that many of us are missing. Now, the other point I'm making is that 17% of employees are disengaged, and one of the things that I want you to be aware of is, I think a lot of times it's kind of like watering a dying root. It's better to cut it off and give more energy to the ones that are prospering and blooming and growing. A lot of times our attention will go to the employees that are disengaged when there may be a better answer. It may have been a mistake to hire them in the first place, to tell you the truth on that. Now, the other fact is that the top reasons that employees do stay are often not what people expect. I think a lot of times people think it's all about show me the money. If you will take notice, it's actually a very small percent, and 7%, where people are much more concerned about development, opportunities they may have, and their organization's mission. For example, if something is serving a better cause, people are really into making a difference and being significant in their lives. And so if their job does not have meaning or purpose and they're not serving humankind in a special way, the motivation for many people will drop to a much lower percentage, or they'll simply leave. You will lose some of your best employees. Now, there's another bullet here that says no desire for change. I'm comfortable here. That's 10% of your people. I will tell you right now, if you've got a lot of people that are just there because they're comfortable, they're probably not going to be your top producers. because their motivation is not what you're really looking for. Job conditions obviously are fairly important, but note that the highest percentage is opportunity and development, not show me the money. And so as we continue on, what we find out that motivation, when it comes to motivation, one size does not fit all. For too long, I think we've been focusing on rewards and recognition. There is a sector of our society that likes getting to be the boogie button of the month, the employee of the month, you know, getting the plaque. I just spoke somewhere. It was in Illinois last month. And I got a plaque. I don't know about you, but I honestly, I don't know what to do with these plaques. I know they paid money for it. I hate to throw it out. They look a little tacky on my shelf. I've got better things to put there. It doesn't really trip my trigger, but it may for someone else. So if you're in a leadership role, and I'm going to be trying to integrate this so that you as an individual or technician or in a managerial role will get some value out of this. But the fact is, it's different strokes for different folks. And there is also a problem with external rewards. While we need to know what people's needs, wants, and desires are to really understand any system of motivation, know that, again, one size does not fit all. When you look at Mother Teresa, her motivation, and she certainly made a difference in the world, but her motivation was all about, you know, really getting a lot of internal gratification for the work that she did. My goodness, nobody would go through her lifestyle if she were at all materialistic. Now, you look at Donald Trump, and obviously ego is a little bit involved, and you know, if the Trump Tower trumps everybody else, he's motivated by power and control and ego, but he's done a lot of things that most of us will never do. And so what we have to understand in each of us and in yourself as individuals is what really motivates you. And one of the problems is the thing that sabotages self-motivation is often the simple fact that if all of our rewards are external, it really does become a problem. If even with parenting, if every time your child does something, you know, they get a quarter, and I'm all for giving, you know, incentives and rewards that teach children that if they work hard, they will get some of the rewards for it. There is a point where we can actually create a dependency where our employees are going to be so dependent on what they externally get that they are totally out of touch with any system of self-motivation. In the big picture, I'm going to tell you, it is only the person who is self-motivated that's going to go above and beyond. Do you really think Albert Einstein, Winston Churchill, I mean, when we look at the great things that have been produced, either by artists, Picasso, whoever, it's because there was an experience of internal satisfaction, and it was doing what comes naturally. It has a lot to do with what your calling in life may be, your soul's code, your mission. And when you are in sync with those instincts, you literally become unstoppable. If you want to take people above and beyond, you really have to create a system of self-motivation. Okay, now, the next slide in terms of interrogatory kinds of self-taught. For years, I've been doing programs on affirmations and visualization, and I do a lot with, you know, the mind-body connection. But I found this interesting, and I actually just discovered this, that research has indicated that interrogative self-talk, more than declarative self-talk, is actually much more powerful. So, for example, many of us have been taught to say, you know, I can do it, I can fix it. Muhammad Ali, what did he say? I am the greatest. And he was, and it did work. But more recent research has indicated that the interrogative self-talk can actually be more potent in terms of motivating ourselves or motivating our team. For example, if we say, can I fix it? There is an implicit message of challenge that actually kind of lights up parts of the brain where people will work harder and longer and faster on a project. This in itself could be a complete seminar. I really feel that this is one important point that you must take home with you. So, for example, if somebody says, will I versus I will, it will yield 2 times the success. What happens is questions, open conversation, declarations in the brain, close conversation, and actually close down the brain. I'll just speak a little bit more about questions. Questions shape our destiny. You hear Tony Robbins and other people make that statement all the time. When you ask a question, it actually stimulates circuitry in the brain where it goes on an automatic search for the answer, especially being in research and development. Some of you may have discovered this on your own, but if you ask a question right before you go to bed where you need a solution, what happens is your mind will process it while you're sleeping, and some of you may have experienced it. You wake up in the morning, and it's like the light bulb experience is laying on your pillow. And so questions are so crucial. In all of our conversations, and I don't want to get off on questions, but it's so crucial that, even if we need to reprimand someone or confront them, if you put it in a question, they give the answer, and then you are in alignment with the person, and it breaks down distance and defensiveness and polarity. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of putting everything in a question. So it also keeps conversations open, which is what you're going to want to. So what we want to do is really understand that questions force one to define if they really want something. I mean, how many times if you ask somebody a question on an issue about maybe working overtime, it defines their reality. They are not motivated by money. So questions also will give you direction on what works with the person. The other issue is, as I said, it opens conversation with yourself as well as with others. So the formula is that when you have an ounce of honest doubt, it is much more powerful than any shot of certainty. When we have confidence plus humility plus some doubt, that is when we come up with solutions. So yeah, we want to be confident. We want to have a positive mind state. But a little bit of doubt challenges people to go the extra mile. We certainly see that in Olympians all the time. So what we need then is a balance of freedom and responsibility. We need that in, if a lot of you are in a parenting role, certainly it's really understanding how much freedom do you give a child and when are they able to accept that level of responsibility. It's the same thing in the work situation. Rules, assuming good faith, encourage that behavior. I will tell you, my parents really had it pretty easy. When I think about it, I don't remember ever being really disciplined. I don't even remember. We just kind of, I don't know. They just basically had, and here's the trick, they had very clear expectations of how we were to behave, and none of us really challenged it. They also assumed that we would do and act an appropriate way. And basically the only message was to do our very best. We've all done quite well with just a simple message of we are expected to do the very best we can do. I did write a book, Winning, interviewed hundreds of people that have gone above and beyond, and that was the common denominator. Not necessarily to be the best, but you do the very best that you can. So I give the example of flying kites. The more responsibility someone takes, the more rope and freedom you give them. If the reins are too tight and you're micromanaging, you are sabotaging someone's potential. And again, kites fly highest against the wind. I say that because the essence of challenge must be in every task to have anybody become an optimal performer. I'm going to be speaking about that very specifically in the second half. So if you're going to create bigger traps, all you're going to do is create smarter mice. They're just going to find more ways to get around the loopholes. You see it with our politicians. You see it everywhere. And don't fall into that trap. You basically are going to get what you expect. And I will tell you, whether it's marriage or hiring somebody on the job, if you marry the right person, if you hire the right person, look at Southwest Airlines. They hire for attitude because they feel that's a lot more difficult to change and to improve. You can always teach the skills. If you hire the right person in the first place, you're going to have many fewer headaches. And, you know, there's a point where you just got to kick them out the door and let go of them, because if they're in that 10% where they're just kind of there because they're comfortable, I'm not sure they're really adding anything to anybody's bottom line. So let me share a little bit about leadership and how that can engage employees to be more motivated. If a leader, and most people that strive to be in a leadership role, whether it's President of the United States or CEO of the company, power is a motivator for them. But if it is not equally balanced with empathy, it's going to go to its own demise. And here is a little test where you can check if you are in a leadership role, if you have the kind of empathy that is necessary to motivate your team. What I'd like you all to do is take, if you're right-handed, you take your right index finger. If you're left-handed, you may want to take your left. But take your index finger and on your forehead, just kind of abstractly draw out an E. I want you all to do it. And I'm just curious, would you all take note if the E went to the right or to the left? Just pay attention to that for a minute. The leaders, or people in general that have more empathy, will draw the E so that the person outside yourself, somebody else, looking at you will see it in the right format. If you are more self-centered and an egotistical team leader, you are probably going to draw the E in the reverse so that when you're looking at it from your eyes, it'll be in the right direction or format. I'll be curious to see how many. I would like to see how many of you drew it one way or the other. So if you want to answer that, I would appreciate it. The other point I'm going to make very quickly is speak human, not professionalized, or what I call professional ease. When one of the airlines was apologizing, I think it was Virgin Atlantic, and it's like, Virgin Atlantic so appreciates your patience during this time period of stress of sitting on the tarmac 5 hours or whatever it might have been. Why don't we just say, don't you love it when a pilot gets on and just honestly says, I'm as frustrated with this as you are? When we connect on that more one-on-one human level, that is when people speak to us. That is when you speak their language, and that's when you're going to get an engaged employee. The other is talk less, listen more. I think all of us have heard that. I don't know if we always practice what we preach. But to really understand their wants, needs, and desires, you got to shut up and listen. And the last point here is to marry profit with purpose. You notice where the statistics and the percentages are high in terms of what motivates people. People are very concerned about living life on purpose and making a difference. And if you're only focused on cash and profit, they're going to find a better place to go. So, tension management. Here is the secret to all success. I will tell you about how many years ago, 6 years ago, I met T. Felton Napier, who designed the Change Works Grid. We've shortened it to Change Grid. This is the assessment tool that so many of you have written to me about. And we're going to, I will follow up with those who are interested in a group session. In 42 years of training, I think this guy hit the nail on the head. The real important ingredient in what motivates change and influences change is the level of tension. How many of you talk about, sitting on the hot seat? There is a certain point where, well, they've done studies where they keep adding a few more degrees to the hot seat, and eventually people get off. They get off the hot seat at different times because people have a different level of tolerance for stress. But what you need to do as a manager, or even in your own self-motivation, if you are not in a managerial role, is to really understand what level of tension you will perform optimally. Many of you are familiar with the book, The Psychology of Flow. You hear things about, I'm in the flow, I'm in the zone. If you're a golfer, you'll talk about being in the zone. Michael Jordan talks about being in the flow. And the fact is that the author of the book, there's 26 consonants in a row, Csikszentmihalyi, I think is how he pronounces it, is that people perform optimally. You will have your employees most engaged and performing optimally when they are at an ideal state between boredom and challenge. And the biggest problem is when people are not given a challenge. And I will tell you, there are too many wimpy managers that are not giving people the challenge. They get bored, they get into apathy, and no one performs well there. Remember, it's kind of a balancing point between boredom and a high level of challenge or anxiety. If people are too anxious, what happens? The blood flow to the brain cuts off. Nobody does well when there's no gas or no fuel to the brain. Nobody does well when they are so confident, they've done it so many times, and you have seen it. If you went to a larger university, as I have, the teaching assistants are often better teachers than the professors that are just sitting there because they've been there for 30 years. They may have won a Nobel Prize, but the natural, inevitable effect of mastery is apathy. Do not forget that. The natural, inevitable effect of mastery is apathy, and that's why people, even the United States, the Roman Empire, rise to the top, and then they tumble and fall. We are on our way down, whether you want to admit it now. We need to get back into some challenge and really grasp the fact that we're in crisis. That could be happening in your organization. It happened to Kmart. It happened to IBM in the early 80s, but fortunately, they came back with a strong recovery. So the bottom line is challenge. Nothing happens without it. Boredom. Nothing happens without it. And anxiety will, a high stress level will sabotage your success every time. You need to get into that equal balance point between the two. And what I want to introduce you to now is where we can motivate, monitor, measure, and manage change. The tool I'm going to introduce you to is the tool I mentioned in the article that so many of you responded to. It's the only tool that I know that will do this. It is client-oriented. You can take that if you're a technician. You can use it for a complete team. You can do a 360 with it. And it's not like a personality test. It's not like the DISC, which many of you have taken. It's not like the Myers-Briggs. This is based on each and every separate task. So it is dynamic, it's ever-changing, and what it does, and this is the beauty of it, is that it actually predicts how someone's going to perform on a task. Now you tell me how you're going to beat that. Jeff, do you want to open up for questions and answers before I go into that, or do you want me to just keep on plowing through?
Actually, you know what, we started late, so why don't you just keep going and we'll stop and ask questions at the end.
Okay, I feel like I'm on a roll. I would just as soon do that now. Okay, The one thing that will motivate change, and what, when people say people resist change, come on, give me a break. I've been married and divorced. How many of you have been married and divorced? We changed. We got a divorce. That was a change. We got remarried. That was another change. Some of us have done it. Some of us are into serial monogamy here. But the fact is we changed. Many of you have changed jobs. You may have changed schools. You don't change your kids. Maybe they change you in for a better model. But the bottom line is people do change. And they do if there is something in it for them. The one thing that is the real carrot for change in what people are seeking is to have more control. It's really about the ability to regulate, direct, or influence the outcome of a process or event. You guys are into certainly having some ability to predict the outcome. And so this is what will motivate people in the direction of, openly accepting change. The fact is people pay attention to where they find their tension. It's just not true. If there's a priority or an emergency or something, there's a deadline you have to meet, all of your attention goes there. Have you ever noticed how much you get done in the very last minute? I mean, it's amazing how productive we can be. If you have a sliver, it might irritate you, but if somebody cuts off your left arm, guess where the tension is going to go? Why do you think people don't stop smoking until they're going to die if they don't give up those weeds because they've got cancer, emphysema? This is human nature. Unfortunately, it's not always a healthy one, but it is how we are kind of designed. So there are three factors behind influencing change with yourself or if you're managing a team. Things have to be logical, they have to be feasible, and there has to be a certain level of tension. I am showing you this chart because you will notice that sometimes there may not be logic, it may not be feasible, but if there is tension, people will change. And when I say logical, I'm meaning, is the experiment, is it logical to do? Is it good from a business standpoint in terms of the expenses involved? And feasible is, do you have the resources to do it? But you hear the old saying, where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm going to just talk about this as we do some of the other slides. So I'm going to skip right by that. And now I'm introducing you to the actual grid that will allow you to motivate, monitor, measure, and manage change. Just very briefly, and here you can see on the right, it can give you short-term insights, long-term strategies. You can do a 360. You can use it to facilitate your team in terms of getting a group personality. Let me tell you just very briefly here. If somebody is in a higher level of, and I'll explain this to you in a minute, of power, and they're taking all the initiative. Some of you might even be in a marital relationship like that, where you always take the initiative, and guess what happens? The person or the partner on your team or in your marriage that is more passive then allows you to do more and more and more. What that does is stress you out, and you go more up-grid, and they become even more passive and dependent on you. How many of you can relate to that, either on the job or at home? This is the beauty. So what you do as a team, you start finding out where the balance is on this team and who has to move their position to have a more of a high-performance work team in your environment. So here we go. If you look at this grid, you can see like a megaphone right going through the center. If you look at that purple dot and then just see a megaphone, almost like a cheerleader megaphone going from the small end to the wide end. That is a level of power. That's where people feel very, very much in control. They make, good decisions. They're solid decisions. They're not reactionary. They're taking a proactive stand. If you move up a little bit, when you look at the top of the megaphone, if you go a little bit higher, you see another line That's kind of parallel, but it's also, you know, spreading out like a megaphone. That space there is what we call power stress. Generally speaking, that is where people are going to perform their best. If you're in sales, that's where people take action and they'll buy. This is where you, as an individual, as a technician, as a researcher, as a manager, want people to be for the most part, because this is where the threshold of activation is, where people stop just talking about it and start implementing the process and performing on an optimal level. If you go a little bit above that, you see that blue line, and if you go above it to the space that you see where the red dot is, that is stress. Do people perform well there? No. They are more reactionary. They're not proactive. They make mistakes. They email intros to Jeff without making the attachment. These are the things, yeah, it's not a good place. And with the work that you people do, you really don't want anybody there because one mistake could be pretty damn costly. Now, as long as we're up there, you will see that little red ball on the top. You will also see one on the bottom and on each side. That is something that we call, they're the danger zones. It's when people are out of bounds. So if somebody's really high up near that red ball, they are so stressed out, you suggest that they get some counseling or put them on Valium, or, you know, you need to take some action because they're not going to be a productive team member. Now, if you go down on the grid, remember the megaphone right in the middle. If you go below it, on the lower edge of the megaphone, and then you see the parallel line below that, that is power apathy. These are people that have, you know what I said, the natural and inevitable side effect of mastery is apathy. These people are people who have been very successful. This is where the United States has been. This is where the Roman Empire has been. This is where Kmart was. They rose to the top, and General Motors, I mean, fortunately, they're making a comeback. Same thing. They rest on their laurels. They have mastered the challenges that were before them. And I'm going to tell you, we all know that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And in a world of perpetual change, it will not, you'll not succeed. You'll be part of those companies that we never even hear of anymore. Okay, this is kind of where the absent-minded professor is. This is the guy that may have such seniority, they've done very well. They used to be good in the classroom, but they are in a state of apathy. They have a lot of ability and they have a lot of skill, but they just got too dang comfortable with it. How many of you can relate to that? And if it's not true of you, how many of you are thinking of someone on your team where you're thinking, yeah, they're just too comfortable. They've gone into power apathy. And even worse, some of the people on your team, could be you, have gone into apathy. So if you look at the blue line that goes downward between there and the red dot on the bottom, those are people that are coming to work and they're on autopilot. They're like zombies and they're not even thinking. Don't expect any creativity. I do a program on creativity, and I'm going to tell you that is the currency of the future. And unfortunately, that is where too many of us are. And certainly in your job, innovation and creativity has to be a crucial ingredient. Now, just looking to the left and right, in-grid are people that just take no risks. I mean, they're probably in a cave someplace. But if you go out-grid to the right, these are people that get so drunk on their power. We see it with politicians. We see it with celebrities. O.J. Simpson, I mean, just got drunk on his own power. There's no boundaries for these people. They're beyond a confidence level that is appropriate to society. They think they're above the law, so they break the law. They often get away with it. But, you know, and I'm going to use O.J. as an example. Taking himself to his own demise is that he ends up in jail for a bunch of stupid trophies because they do get drunk on their own power. There's actually a chemical change that takes place in these people. Now, they take risks beyond anything that's appropriate. I want you to stop for a moment. Are there people in your company that are so off-grid and somebody needs to say, hello, you know, back to earth? So what the whole system of change here is about is managing their level of tension to get people in the optimal place. So with that happy thought, what we're going to do, and I did talk with one of your members at length. He was having a martini when I talked to him again this week. He's on vacation. But anyway, one of the activities, I'm going to, because of our limitation in time, I'm only going to use one activity. But one of the activities that, that he had suggested was that you have to properly assess a customer's needs. So let's just take that as the task. So you list that there as an activity, okay? And just know that your activities can be, you know, a certain task, a goal. It can be relation with us or, you know, with some of your team members. But you should state it as a verb and be very specific and concrete. If you're general, it's going to have very little value. So you put that in the activity column. And then, just so you know, most activities come from 4 basic resources. One is, what is the current situation? What are the tasks, responsibilities? What's the desired situation? And those are your goals. The problems, the risks, the deficiencies, the obstacles. And then the bright side of everything is obviously the strategy skills and assignments, the work that has to be done to come to a solution. We don't have time now, but if some of you want to write to me about this, or if I do the grid with you, I will explain what those 4 colors mean. But basically, white, it's Native American symbolism. It's the hard cold. It's hardcore facts. The green is grass. It grows, so therefore it's gold. Black is the night, obstacles. And the yellow, obviously, is the sun for solutions. So if you find that more interesting, you got that little tidbit. So what we have to do then is be sure that all of the activities can be measurable, very specific, and then we go into the, you know, what we have to do is list the activity in terms of what is the ability. What is your ability to accomplish this task? And what you're going to do is rate it from a 0 to a 12, 0 being the lowest, a 12 being the highest. So if you are rating yourself and you're going to assess your ability, what is your ability to properly assess a customer's needs? And some of you might say, well, you know, I could be a little bit better. I'm going to put myself at about a 10. So let's say that's where you're going to put your ability. And then we go to the challenge. Now, the challenge is much more subjective. I'm a pretty confident person, so I will minimize. You know, if I have to climb Mount Everest, I might think, well, you know, with the right gear and a lot of rehearsal and practice, I can do it. Other people are like, oh my gosh, let's be realistic. So just so you know, a person's perceived challenge, you know, has to do a lot with projecting their own self-esteem, their emotions, their gut feelings about it, and it is not as scientific as what your ability would be, which is going to be based more on years of experience, your track record, and so forth. So how challenging will it be for you to perform that task? To assess it, you might give yourself, let's say, a 9. And what you're going to do is then in the 3rd column, you see where the I is now white. That is the important. So, for example, you might say, properly assess customers' needs. Okay, your ability might be a 10, your challenge your perceived challenge is probably about a 7, we'll say, and your important might be a 12. This is important because you might have all the ability, or somebody that you're supervising, and you might be thinking of right now as we're going through this, might have a ton of ability. And so they can do the job, but it's not really important. It's not going to make or break the research that you're doing, the experiment that you're doing. It's irrelevant. So we have to, put it in perspective by knowing what the importance might be. And these are just some examples of questions that you might ask in terms of the importance. Moving right along then, once you have all your columns filled out and you rate them, you have a 0 or 12 or 7 or 10, whatever is appropriate. Now we're going to plot them on the grid. So let's say my perceived challenge is let's say a 7. My ability I'm going to rate as a 10. So you plot that, and if you've got the challenge as a 7 and this as a 10, you're going to be right around power apathy because there's not a lot of challenge in the job anymore. So for those of you who are in managerial positions, you've got to look at how much challenge you're putting out there for each individual team member. Now, as a team member, I want you to be self-motivated and look at this in the same aspect. So once we plot it, and we don't have time to plot it now, but I'm going to offer a session for those who want to take the grid. Once we have it plotted, so example, let me just say if I think something's really a high challenge and a high ability, it's a 12, it's going to be way out grid. These are the people that have unbelievable confidence and may also have the ability, but they may get, as I said, drunk on it and go beyond the law. So the whole process of what each of you are going to do is monitor your level of motivation with yourself and with your staff by doing up-grid or down-grid, out-grid or in-grid procedures. So here you see the high level of stress. The hybrid is power stress. There's power, power apathy, and apathy. And so, for example, if somebody is way stressed out, you can tell that they're just screwing up on things. They need to be taken off the job. Or you can downgrid them. You normalize, you simplify, you maybe give them more resources. Could be administrative help. You add resources so that you can create an optimal performer. Nobody's going to do well in stress. So what you do is normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources, brings their stress level down to power stress, and you're going to have a peak performance. So if you assess another employee or yourself, as you may take this, and let's say you need to go upgrade. This is a person who's mastered everything. They have a lot of ability, but they're zoning out on you. You want to increase the standards. You change the task. They're bored with it. You awaken emotions. What's going to get them that passion and excitement that they had 72 years ago when they first took the job? And then you've got to boost accountability. You may have just allowed them to slip between the cracks. They've got to be accountable because that raises the standard and they have a norm that they have to reach then. So outgrid, these are the people that generally need encouragement, coaching, some inspiration, and they have to be shown that not to decide is to decide. If they don't take some risk, they may be losing out. How many of you are people that are such low risk takers and you've lost out on some opportunity? These are the things that have to be pointed out. Because remember, listen to this, as people become more aware, which is what the grid will do, it'll increase their awareness. Increasing their awareness will increase their tension, and their tension will increase their motivation to change. How sweet is that? And then last but not least, if you have somebody that might be out-grid, what you want to do is reduce their risk. They're just out of bounds, and appeal to their nobler motives. They have a lot of ability, but it has to be focused more on a common good rather than just their ego. You have to be clear on boundaries, and then increase again, any of the changes that they need to make. So basically, what you are doing as somebody, as a tension manager, is what you need to do is manage your tension, manage their tension, and get everyone into an optimal performance mode for a high-performance work team. Are there any questions? And I know we don't have a lot of time, but if people want to email me questions afterwards, that's fine too. And what I wanted to offer the group is that if you want to do the assessment, I will do a complimentary one. We have to set it up with your specific task, so I need more of your input. And then as a group, we will do that. So that's just something
Edie,
I'm offering.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yep.
I'm going to interrupt you because we do have questions, and if you don't mind, we'll figure out how to do that. With 1,000 people on the line, you may be overwhelmed, so you may want to be careful about individual requests. But we'll figure out.
Okay.
Let me get to some questions quickly because it wouldn't be fair to people listening and watching if we didn't get to some of their questions.
Okay.
One of them is right at the beginning. How have the motivation factors been broken down by age? And where do the statistics come from? You speak to the percentage engaged and the percentage disengaged, but they don't add up to 100. So what's the third group?
You know what? I grabbed that from an article, and whoever asked that, I do have the article on the other computer. Let me get that to you, and and that's not to say that older people are more engaged and more highly motivated. I think it's to really say that sometimes I think we know this, that there is a generation difference in what motivates people. So my guess, because I always look at statistics not as, everything I learned about the neurological system in college is no longer pertinent, is that it may be, how the managers were. And they may have had a system where people that have been there longer may be more engaged. I think a lot of it has to do with knowing how to motivate. Okay.
We'll send you the questions, and you'll have a few people actually asked that. You'll have their email addresses if you wouldn't mind sending them that article. That'd be great. So is it worth trying to encourage underperforming employees, or is that something innate that as an employer we have no real hope of changing?
If people are undermotivated, I think they obviously have to be more of a participant in the process of, hey, what would motivate you? I think we take too much responsibility as managers, and what you have to do is there again, ask the questions, get their participation, and do some coaching. You know what, I don't think this is the right place for you, and maybe get them to be aware that there's a better possibility. It might be going back to school and getting a better job. Or if you can move them out of the system, without a lawsuit, that might be the way to do it as well. But a lot of it, I think, is involving coaching and facilitation for them to be aware that they're a misfit. And if they're not motivated, shift the responsibility to them.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. The question that keeps getting asked, any chance of getting the grid with your labels attached? So how do they get the grid without working through the grid with you?
As I was looking at, as I was taking this from, the group that invented it, I was just thinking, why do they not have that? Let me check on that, but I know that they're very possessive. If I do a training program, I can share the materials. Otherwise, I have to check with them. They're pretty possessive on their intellectual property. But yeah, email me and I'll see what I can do. But as I was doing that, I'm thinking, why did they not do it? I want to say one other thing about your very first question, Jeff, is the nice thing about it that no matter what the stats are, if people that are there longer are more engaged, a lot of people that are there longer are the ones that are in apathy because they're resting on their laurels. So, I just took that from an article. We have to put that in perspective, but the important thing and the beauty of the change grid is that it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, the tension management, getting the challenge in, reducing the risk, reducing the stress, getting them in that optimal position. It's beautiful because it's so individualized that whether you're a millennial or a Generation X or you've been there 30 years or 1 month, it doesn't matter. It is that individualized.
Edie, I'm going to have to cut you short. I apologize. I know there's so much behind this and so much research. I am going to say to everyone, first of all, thank you so much for your insights, Edie. If you're interested, and I see so many of you are asking me about the grid itself, I think the best way to do this, let me give you Edie's email address, and you can discuss it with her, whether she can do it with your organization. Her email address is Edie, E-D-I-E, at Raether.com, and her last name is spelled R-A-E-T-H-E-R. So that's Edie at Raether.com. Edie, thank you again so much. Edie does speak and train, obviously, and consults, and like all of our presenters, is available to come into your organization to do that training and consulting. So start a conversation with her. She'd be glad to hear from you. She's also agreed that she will answer all the questions we didn't get to. Thank you so much for your questions. And I just hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to thank our sponsor one more time, Unity Lab Services, without whom the webinar series wouldn't even be possible. Next month, mark your calendars for the first Wednesday of the month for Effectively Growing Your Talent. Are you sunlight and water or just manure? With professional speaker and author Rebecca Morgan. Please mark your calendars for Wednesday, August 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Central Time. Watch your email for more details. And again, it's my honor to be back with you. I'm glad that I got to come back and be your host. And until next month, this is Jeff Tobe urging you to keep coloring outside those lines.